In today's video, I will be talking about Bitcoin. Some people think it is just a giant scam, while others support it as an alternative to regular currencies. Elon Musk is a supporter of Bitcoin, while others such as Peter Schiff and Michael Burry are against it. To understand what Bitcoin really is, you have to understand what money actually is. In the early days, people would come up with a way to convey value to one another in pieces of exchange. Let's say for example, you have two farmers. One farmer has a cow, and he wants to trade with the other farmer who has a pig. They could just exchange them regularly, but let's just say that the farmer with the cow doesn't need a pig, and the farmer with the pig doesn't need the cow. What they do is find another way of exchange called an IOU note. An IOU note can be anything. It used to be seashells, but it was eventually done in gold. In the United States it was called the gold standard. Basically you could go to the Federal Reserve and exchange money into gold. Then, FDR didn't like the fact that the US dollar could be inflated, because you can't just create extra money. When you create extra money, that doesn't mean that you create extra value. Let's say the government has a debt of $100,000. You might think that they would need to come up with $100,000 in taxes, or the value of $100,000. What governments later learned is that they could just print extra money to get rid of the debt. This is one way the government can get out of debt and they can spend without taxing the citizens. Later on, Nixon got rid of the gold standard and the United States dollar became what is known as a fiat currency. A fiat currency is a currency that doesn't have any underlying value. So, the United States dollar is based on the full faith and credit of the United States. The seashells were a way to say that once the farmer does his farming is the same way that the federal government is reliant on your full faith and credit in them for the amount of money you have in your bank account. And that is the way the United States dollar's value is established. Now, all of that is backdrop to what Bitcoin is. And that is why people shouldn't trust fiat currencies, because the government could inflate the money at any moment. So, what if you could do transactions without worrying about anything? All a Bitcoin is a belief that other people are going to use the Bitcoin. Supposedly the creator of Bitcoin is a man by the name of Satoshi Nakamoto. Nobody really knows who created it. That's awesome, because you don't want to have a centralized guy who controls all of Bitcoin and can steal all of it and make it so that he can inflate it at any moment. The basic purpose of Bitcoin is that the full faith and credit in the United States doesn't mean anything and you are worried about them being able to just print extra money at any given time. It also happens to be the case that Bitcoin cannot be controlled from the outside because governments can make currencies, but the government doesn't have the power to make Bitcoin. That is because Bitcoin is not a centralized currency. It is a decentralized cryptocurrency. So that comes through cost and some elements. On the cost side, you cannot rely on the ability of the coin to give you some hard asset in exchange for Bitcoin, because that doesn't exist. You don't have to worry that the creators of Bitcoin are simply going to inflate the value of Bitcoin or deflate the value of Bitcoin. This is the difference between fiat currency and Bitcoin. The U.S. government decides the value of the currency and then that value is distributed to all of the other citizens. The value of the U.S. dollar is decided by the U.S. government. The U.S. dollar is decided by the government. When it comes to Bitcoin, it is precisely the opposite. Instead you have a bunch of people, and these people have to decide what they think the coin is worth, because Bitcoin is not an actual government. You have all of these people investing their own assets into Bitcoin, and the definition of value is incredibly different. The definition of value is coming from the outside in, as opposed to from the inside out. Well, then you need to find another repository of value. So what Bitcoin is you believe that the currency is stable enough to be used and enough people will be around to accept the currency that has inherent value, instead of you're relying on the government's ability to tax and government's ability to stimulate and the government's ability to print and take out of circulation. Instead of relying on those powers, you're relying on the idea that there is something that is trusted by enough people that they will use that in the absence of a government. So you are giving up a certain amount of faith in the pure unbridled power of government in favor of faith in other people believing in the same IOU notes that you believe in. So theoretically you could have people deciding what we don't want to use Bitcoin anymore. Businesses are not going to accept Bitcoin as payment anymore and the value could go to zero. The reason people call it a cryptocurrency is because the technology of Bitcoin, the thing that prevents it from being inflated, is that there are a set number of Bitcoins in circulation. The Bitcoins that are in circulation cannot be messed around with, and cannot be counterfeited. But that is because the crypto technology that is used in order to verify the transactions. That is what blockchain technology essentially is. There is an entire group of people, they're called Bitcoin miners, and their job is to simply verify the transaction. Their job is to try and unlock all the cryptography in order to ensure that the action is legitimate and make sure that you can't use the same cryptocurrency twice. So once a certain number of transactions are verified, that is called a block. A block is added to the blockchain. The more blocks that are added to the blockchain are creating a more and more unbreakable chain of events and more full faith and credit in the Bitcoin itself, which is why it's good. That means that Bitcoin's value is entirely upon how many people use the currency. It really is no different than gold, except that gold is a hard, tangible asset, and Bitcoin is a digital asset. But with Bitcoin, you can buy things at the grocery store and other places, unlike with gold. As people see the government not paying back these debts, and they will only continue to run up these debts, you will see people buying Bitcoin as an alternative source for transactions. Thank you for watching.